For this particular recording, I wanted to go over the research article you were required to read, and of course the quiz that you had. Really, I just wanted to expose you to research articles or to the parts of a research article that will assist you not only in this particular course for your final paper, but also moving forward in the program and just making it more efficient for you to identify particular salient points of a research article and easier for you to grab some information. So, kind of going along with the quiz, what we're looking for, of course, in this particular article, as of course the sections. First, we see here on page 2 is the introduction, where this part of the paper kind of sets up the argument for the actual research question and the research in general. So what you're really going to get out of this is a quick framework of the paper and the particular research, and of course the specific purposes of the research. So question 1 of your quiz was, what is the primary purpose of this research? And boiled down, the answer is to examine the effects of case dispositions, or rather the 4, dismissed, probation, jail, and prison. And what are those effects on the drug court population and the likelihood of recidivism? So you see here at this paragraph we're looking at, the current study adds to the existing drug court recidivism literature. This is what we are, or the primary purpose of the research, and when you are completing research, you want to look to fill a gap of something that isn't actually out there. Of course, in the literature review section, you see the literature that has been completed on the topic. So here we're talking about what exactly how exactly this research is going to contribute to that existing literature. So what you get out of this particular paragraph is you get the primary purpose. You also get here the exact sample size, which was question 3 on the quiz. What is your sample size? The answer is 824. As you see, we analyzed case disposition records of 824 drug court participants to determine the independent influence criminal dispositions have on program reoffending. Also, in this particular paragraph, you see the primary research question. Now, not all research articles are going to have it italicized. Of course, me and a couple of other individuals wrote this particular research article, and my preference is to italicize the research question. So the primary research question is, of course, what are the effects individual case dispositions have on recidivism within a drug court population? And you see in the paragraph below, we actually discuss how we're going to contribute to the existing literature. Question 4 on the quiz was, who makes up the sample? Of course, in that previous paragraph up here, we do see that it is drug court participants. And though when we get into the methods section, it's more specific on where these 824 persons come from and when they exactly participated in drug court. But here you get a kind of an idea. So moving through the introduction, we then come across our review of the literature. Now, some research articles are going to have it in bold, where it's going to say review of the literature or literature review. Here, of course, you notice I just start in, or myself and my co-authors just start in on addressing the recidivism and drug court participation. So we move through that literature so you can see what's been done. As a reader, you can see the previous research been done on drug court participants and their proclivity to recidivate. We go through all of the research And then we get here to the sentencing effects on recidivism. There's also a body of literature outside of drug court where researchers in the past have looked at the actual effects sentencing someone to prison or probation has on recidivism rates. As you know through reading this article, much of the literature out there suggests that by sending someone to prison, it's actually a criminogenic effect on recidivism. That people that go to prison, rather than being sentenced to probation, these persons that go to prison are more likely to recidivate. That kind of flies in the face of our understanding of deterrence theory. But there are a lot of reasons, theoretical and otherwise, why individuals who go to prison are more likely to recidivate. Generally, when they come out, they are in need of basic survival elements, such as a place to live, food, a job, and so forth and so on. So these all contribute to the idea of recidivism and what makes someone more likely to recidivate. So we move through the literature review, and always right after the literature review, you're going to get the data and methods section. Of course, this being a research methods course, this is most interesting to us, or we should be most interested in this section. Of course, when we're looking at who makes up the sample, that question 4, we see here that the sample includes all persons who participated and officially completed, successfully or unsuccessfully, the program between 2008 and 2013. This, of course, occurred in a Midwestern Metropolitan Adult Drug Court. Of course, in our Chapter 3, when we're talking about the idea of anonymity and confidentiality, generally speaking, we get, when we do program or we use data from particular programs, we generally do not specify what the program is. So we give it a generic name, like here, Midwestern Metropolitan Adult Drug Court. This, of course, was not the actual name of the drug court, but it's supposed to hide the identity of the drug court. And if I were to give the place in which the data was collected, then everyone would know some of the particulars about this particular drug court. So over a 6-year period, there were 824 individuals that participated in this particular drug court program. Now, when we look at assignment 2, unit of analysis, our unit of analysis is at the individual level, and specifically, it is drug court participants. And we'll talk about, in a different lecture, that particular assignment and how to differentiate our unit of analysis. So right here, it just tells in the sample section where the sample comes from. Then, in the articles generally that I write, I clearly identify the dependent variable. You'll find this in most, whether there's an actual heading to it or not. But in the methods section, you are going to find a description of the dependent variables and the independent variables. So here, when we look at our dependent variable, it is, of course, recidivism. Now, recidivism can mean a lot of different things. Thus, in this section, we have to operationalize. You have probably come across in Chapter 5 the concept of operationalization or operational definition. This is where that takes place. As the researcher, I must explain to the reader what exactly I mean by recidivism. And of course here it is captured under 2 outcomes in over 3 time intervals, which essentially gives us 6 dependent variables. So what we see here in question 5 of the quiz is, what are the dependent variables? It is general recidivism over a 1, 2, 3 year period. And then it is felonious recidivism over a 1, 2, 3 year period. And this was all individuals who were convicted of a crime rather than, say, being arrested for a crime. So that is our dependent variable or dependent variables and the operationalization of that and some of the descriptive statistics. Then we come down here to our treatment variable, which is also an independent variable. But based on the research design of this, we consider it an actual treatment variable. So it's an ordinal measure, which we'll get to in Chapter 5, but we see here that there are 4 attributes to the dependent variable, which is case outcome. It is case dismissal. It is if a person received probation, a person received jail, or a person received prison. And we see down here our covariates, which are also independent variables. And we look at here and we can get the descriptives of that. You can read this list and list out all the independent variables. That's one way to do it. Of course, you get all your descriptive statistics. But you could also quickly go down, I'm sorry, this might be giving you all a headache, down to the chart, which is embedded in an actual published research article. This one is not in print yet. And you can get just a quick list of them. So all of our independent variables, of course, we have our treatment variable, then we have age, sex, race, drug of choice, convicted charge, and so on. So you can get a quick list of the dependent and independent variables without necessarily running through the entire operationalization of them. As we move back up, we come across the analytical strategy, which again I do more probably to spell out than some other articles, but question 7 does look at what statistical analysis being used for this study. There are 2. Of course, the most prominent one here is you see a propensity score analysis, and it details what exactly is a propensity score analysis and how it is used. Again, I don't want you to get bogged down in the statistics. I would just want you to be able to identify them. And then within the propensity score analysis, we use specifically inverse probability of treatment weighting. And then we use, to get our treatment effects, a series of multinomial regression analyses. You're going to see the idea of regression quite a bit. And that's just, there's just many forms of multivariate analysis, and multinomial regression just happens to be one of them. Don't worry so much about the data diagnostics. Here you get the results of the study. These is generally laid out in a lot of statistical jargon. Generally, when you're looking at, for your purposes, looking at, or looking for results, I should say, you can go down to the discussion and conclusion, and some of the major takeaways will be there, which of course is questions 8, in your own words, what is the major takeaway? This is dependent upon you. In many instances, I would say that the big takeaway from this article is that, yes, of course, persons that have a case dismissed fare better or less likely to recidivate. And oddly enough, those who go to jail rather than prison are most likely to recidivate. Would probably be the most or the biggest takeaway from the article. And which leads us into question 9 on the quiz. What is the most criminogenic criminal disposition? And it is jail in this particular instance. Last I want to show you is this section in the discussion inclusion, and it's the limitations section. Based on Chapter 3, ethical reporting, everyone that writes a research article should be responsible enough to acknowledge the limitations of their study. All studies come with limitations. Of course, here I say that ours is no exception, and you can read some of the limitations within this particular study so you understand some of the validity points. So that concludes this particular lecture, and I will get back to you on additional information pertaining to the quiz and otherwise.